I think the sad thing is that some of God's greatest stories get buried under shame.
Yep.
Because people are too afraid to say what God rescued them from. And
That's good, Cameron.
I had this mentality where I go, hang on. And Carissa, she's an amazing girl. And she and I mean, this has been absolute hell. So anybody that's watching goes, oh, I want that. Plan on it being a 5-year thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Because one of the things that bothered the people at the church was like, you need to go to the 6-month program and get healed and go away for 6 months. And everybody else I talked to said, that's not how addiction works. Addiction isn't something that gets healed. Right. It's something, it's a symptom.
Welcome to the Daron Earlewine podcast, where we awaken you to become who you were born to be. Here's your host, Daron Earlewine.
Hey, welcome back to the Daron Earlewine podcast. Daron Earlewine, your host. As always, how are you doing? Hope you're doing great. It is a sunshiny day here in beautiful Flat, Indiana, and so glad you're back with us for episode 52. And today we're sitting down with a new friend of mine, Cameron Sprinkle, and this episode is a little intense, and the delivery of it isn't intense. The delivery of it is actually really gentle and gracious and awesome, but the content is intense, and it's a good intense. It's a necessary intense because it's taken us to a place of understanding how we come back from failure. And here's what I can guarantee you on episode 52 of the podcast. You're going to fail. You've already failed, right? We don't get through this life perfect. We just don't. I mean, if you want to get super theological, right? All of us have fallen short of the glory of God. We know that. But we make mistakes. We do things that we never thought that we could possibly do. And today's story is one of those stories, and how Jesus has outshined the failures and brought healing to the life of Cameron Sprinkle. You're going to really, really, really be challenged and love what you hear in this episode, because you're going to hear the grace and healing and consistency and gentleness of Jesus through the process. And I'm excited to get to it. Thank you so much for downloading the episode. Thanks for those of you that are leaving us reviews, sharing, liking the episodes. I want to thank everybody that continues to join the YouTube channel that's watching there. I appreciate it. Leave a review, like, subscribe, and share it with 3 or 4 friends, and help us get the word out for this podcast so we can continue to awaken people to become who they were born to be. We're going to get in pretty quick here, guys. I want you to jump into this episode. I don't want to talk too long in it. And Cameron's story is I'm not even going to give you a hint. You're just going to have to listen to it. It's inspiring. I've loved getting to know this guy, and you're going to enjoy the story. And here's the where I want to set you up for. He's going to talk about the moment as he's going through this moment of failure, when he is has someone that reaches out, that walks with him through this. And in the context of this moment, he says that he apologizes to this woman for the impact that his failure is going to have on her kids. And she says, it's okay. They will see Christ outshine your failures. And I love that reality. That in these moments, in your moments where you feel like all anyone is going to be able to see is my weakness or my failure, to have the hope that in anything, if Christ is invited into it, Christ will outshine you in your failures. Meaning that the redemption that he brings, the forgiveness that he brings, the grace that he brings, he will outshine. When he is central, when he is our focus, it's amazing what he can do. And I was just thinking, as I was just saying, there's so much to this episode, and it's frustrating to me because when we say, when Cameron talked about his failure, is the tough reality for me sometimes in our organized circles of church is that the people that are shamed the most are the people that either get caught in a failure or confess a failure. And what I found is the majority of us are all in some way, shape, or form failing to live up to the standard that we wish we were. And I pray that this episode, as you listen to it, it enlarges your grace for yourself, that you would love your neighbor as you love yourself. So it enlarges your grace for yourself, but it also enlarges the grace you have for others. As you realize that shaming, ostracizing, canceling people, it doesn't fix the problem. Shame dislocates people from the opportunity to find healing. And it is not ours to shame. It's not ours to distance. It's not ours to cancel. It's ours to heal. It's ours to walk beside. It's ours to allow Christ to outshine us in the process. And I pray that happens as you listen to this episode right now. So sit down, this interview with Cameron Sprinkle, right here on the Daron Earlewine podcast, episode 52. We'll see you in a few minutes. Hey, welcome back to the Daron Earlewine podcast. Sitting down today with Cameron Sprinkle. Cameron, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much.
We're going to have a great conversation. I'm convinced of it. You are a creative genius. You worked with us in the remake of some of our Spiritual DNA videos. We love the whole experience. You came to us so highly recommended, and we enjoyed hanging out with you and what you did and the gifts, obviously, that God has given you in that space. I wanted to sit down and learn more about you. We've got a chance to do that. And what I love is that there's so much depth here, and the conversation I think is so necessary to happen. So glad you're on the podcast, dude.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm really humbled by that. I wasn't ready for that right out of the gate.
Well,
so at some point we'll talk about my insecurity, my inability to receive compliments. We'll get there at some point.
We got like 30, 40 minutes to get there. Yeah. So that's give us kind of the vitals. Who is Cameron Sprinkle? Is he married? Does he have kids? What does he do? Give us a quick overview of the nuts and bolts.
Yeah. So I'm married. We just celebrated 12 years.
Congratulations.
My wife, Carissa. Yeah. And then we have a daughter who will be 5 in 1 month or in October. And her name is Scarlett Faith Sprinkle. And I own my own video production company. And I'm an Enneagram 4 Wing 3.
Okay.
I know that means something to you.
It does mean
For
something
most
to me.
people, I'll say, if that means anything to you, but here I know it means a lot.
It does. We get that. We're very deep into it. We get it.
Yeah, it's been really, the Enneagram's been really helpful and instructive for my wife and I. And
especially mysterious, you know what I mean? And you're kind of caught in this enigma, wrapped in an epiphany of yourself, right? Yep. And then when you understand that, you go, wait a second. I have a road here, towards healing and towards connection
and purpose. Yeah, because you spend the first however many years prior to finding the Enneagram, however long that is, probably most people 30 years, and thinking that there's something wrong with you, and then you discover, hey, I think maybe God made me this way on purpose, and maybe it's actually a good thing, and so maybe I need to forgive parts of myself that don't even need forgiving.
Yeah,
give myself grace in ways that I didn't realize. So,
no doubt. And you're an INFP, which is crazy because I'm an ENFP. So we're basically the same personality type, except after the end of this, I'll be jazzed up because we had time with people. You know what I mean? Your team's here, my team's here. You'll get done with the conversation and be like, it's time for a nap.
Yeah, I'm going to lay down.
So those are some of the nuts and bolts about you. And I'm glad we got the context of that because I think it's going to give us context to the kind of the journey that you're going to take us on right now of how you've, and I don't want to give the ending away, but this is really a process that I want you to take us through is I guess you could say is how do you find, your purpose after, hitting rock bottom, or even how do you find your faith when you feel like you've lost it? And you've been through quite a journey over the past decade. And I guess to set the context, what I want to go back to is what's crazy is we talk a lot about people finding their purpose early in life, that, they had a moment at 5 or 6 where it was like, man, I was doing the thing, Mm-hmm. But what's crazy about your story is your story kind of began in some ways through the prayers of like your parents and grandparents. Yeah. So before you were even thought of, God was kind of at work. Tell us that story.
Yeah. So my great grandpa was named Reverend Luke Martin, back when people were reverends still.
Yes.
And in the 1920s, he felt the Lord's calling on his life to be a church planter and to be a preacher and a pastor. And he prayed over his wife's womb that God would give them musical children so that his churches would always have music. And God seemed to answer that prayer. They had, I think, 6 kids, and all of them participated in some way.
Really?
In the music. Yeah.
Is that how it works? You just order it? Is that because I
mean, we went through infertility, so something got
doesn't
lost.
seem like it's that easy.
Yeah, it
sometimes.
doesn't seem that easy.
Oh, I would have. Yeah, I missed that. I was musical. I was hoping my kids would be musical. With the sports things has worked, but I should have gone
praying
stronger
against the sports thing.
Okay.
I wanted to stay home.
Okay, I
can
get it.
teach you all the arts and crafts. I just don't want to go to soccer practice.
I just wanted a drummer. You know what I mean? It's not over yet. You know, the kids
over.
can pick it up later.
Yeah.
But it hasn't
God, all
happened so
things are
far.
possible.
That's true. Thank you, Cameron.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so your grandpa prayed.
Yeah.
Great grandpa.
So, so I came from that lineage. The baby of the family was my grandma, ma'am, and she recently passed away and left me actually some of the master recordings of these gospel albums that those kids made in the 70s.
Really?
And so they literally recorded vinyl records of them singing some Gaither songs and some kind of Southern Baptist type of songs. And so I came to Jesus the most introverted hipster way possible,
Okay.
which is by myself listening to records.
Before it was cool.
Before it was cool. And this was in high school, so this would have been around 2000, around the year 2000. And so my mom sang, and I grew up going with her to she was singing at different churches and stuff, and sometimes she'd pull us up, my sister and I, and we'd sing He's Got the Whole World in His Hands and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a song called I Should Have Been Crucified by the Kingsmen Quartet that just wrecked me when I was listening to it, and it was my great aunts and uncles from a recording 30 years prior. And
so you had a recording 30 years prior on vinyl of your family that were in music because your great grandpa prayed them basically into music that brought you to faith and then starts a trajectory on you moving towards doing music ministry.
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
That's freaking awesome is what it is.
It is. And so it's an amazing heritage. I mean, none of them ever used any sheet music or notes or lyrics or anything. Everybody just remembered everything all the time. And so that's the way my family worked. My on my mom's side, our get-togethers, that Martin family, it was just like a Gaither homecoming.
Okay.
Aunt Sharon would sit down and we'd just play every song we knew, and nobody would have to Google any lyrics or anything. We all just knew it all the time. And it's actually tricky because when I got married, my wife Carissa, she has an incredible singing voice, but she does not remember lyrics and melodies the way that I do. And so whenever I whip out the guitar, it's like, oh, let's do this. And she's like, okay, hang on, I got to Google it or whatever. And she feels like a failure because she doesn't have
a photographic memory of music.
Yeah. Now, Scarlett appears to have gotten the gene because she remembers lyrics and stuff like that. So that's a lot of fun.
But I'm guessing that was a pretty traditional Christian vibe, though, for Gaithers, Kingsmen. I mean, it was.
Yeah, it was. I think the church that my great grandpa, I think he planted 4, and his most successful or most well known was called Morning Star in Kokomo, Indiana, and they had a heyday in the 70s where I still, we sold our house in Westfield 2 years ago. We meet with the lady to sell the house at closing. She said, "Are you related to the Sprinkles in Kokomo?" Yeah. Kevin and Kim, yeah. And she said, "I gave my life to Christ at Morning Star Church when I was 5 years old."
Wow.
And she said, "Who was the lady?" I said, "Martha Smalling." She said, "Yep, that was the lady." I said, "She was still there, 20 years ago when I grew up. There's one lady that dedicated herself to child's ministry and so there was a really powerful ministry there.
Yeah.
It had a big impact on Kokomo and had a big impact on my life too.
So was that through then your high school into college years, was that kind of the foregone conclusion? Like, this is my deal. This is the lineage. I'm going to be I'm going to be a worship leader. This is the thing.
Not really, because I definitely wanted to play music. And when I got a guitar, it sure seemed like I was predestined to be able to play it.
Yeah.
I outpaced my friend that I was trying to learn classic rock, and they were trying to learn Dave Matthews and Jack Johnson and wanting to hang out on the acoustic. And I was wanting to push and learn the Freebird solo and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I had this passion for Jesus and a passion for music, and I really didn't have any place to go with it because that church, like most churches, got stuck in its most successful era. And so when I was 16, 17, playing Allman Brothers and wanting a place to use my gift with a guitar, when that church was planted in 1974, they put in purple shag carpet and theater style seating, which was crazy at the time. And it'd be like putting in like a 3D church.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And because my great grandpa wanted to reach people who reach the unchurched to make them feel comfortable, that shag carpet's still there.
Wow.
And the seats are still there. And I don't want to dunk on anybody, but it definitely, I feel like it definitely got stuck. And if we could just get back to how for me, that era would be like the 2000s Hillsong United. I keep waiting for them to make another album like, with Hearts as One or whatever. Yeah. And they keep evolving. And I found myself challenged. And even where we go to Traders Point now, and we sit in about the same section every week. And so like it happens no matter how much you fight the man or the establishment. Like there's that tendency to hang on to what was good. Yeah. And I totally get that. And I get that more and more as I get older. But I didn't have, there was another part of that lineage that got passed down to me that was unfortunate.
All right, let's talk about that.
People saw the charisma and the talent, and that was a wonderful thing. But underneath that, there's a lot of divorce. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of addiction. There's a lot of broken families. And our family tree is so confusing because that guy's been coming to Christmas for 20 years, and I'm not sure who he's married to or who he used to be married to or whatever. And you kind of start to go, hang on, like if you look at the stories, there's just a lot of pain there. And so for me, I actually grew up with a very traumatic, dysfunctional childhood. So on the outside, we were the singing sprinkles, but at home, I had my parents were really the hot and cold, where they were super affectionate and then super harsh and then super affectionate and super harsh. And eventually I learned, like, I don't want to play this game anymore. Yeah. I'd rather feel nothing than to get kind of whipped around like that. And I'm a particularly sensitive man, and at the time I was a particularly sensitive boy. And, for whatever reason, God saw fit to give me to really, really young parents who had their own undealt with trauma or whatever, and were really insecure. And so my childhood, all the way up to now, has been, my relationship with them has been super rocky, traumatic. So I developed a performance orientation that I didn't know about, nobody goes, what I think I'll do? I'll try that performance orientation, see how that works out. And so I was an awkward, introverted kid who maybe had one or two friends, and then I got a guitar, and I was pre-programmed to play it. And fast forward just a few years later, and I'm kind of the resident rock star at my little high school, and I was homecoming king, and I was a big fish in a small pond. And I call it Justin Bieber syndrome, where my giftedness developed ahead of my character. And so...
And is that what you mean by that, the performance kind of syndrome? Is that?
Yeah, if I do this, if I use my gift, you'll like me.
Okay.
And if I keep playing, and so then I developed other gifts of either being articulate or being emotionally available. And people knew that I was safe. They could talk to me about anything. And I started to realize, like, if I don't do these things, nobody cares about me. Nobody cares about. And so then my other metaphor is Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Peter Parker has one friend, and then he puts on a mask and slings around the city, and everybody knows who he is, and everybody loves him. And I don't
think you'd be the only artist.
Oh yeah,
in that, right? I mean, I think coming back to our first part, that Enneagram 4. I mean, especially Enneagram 4 wing 3, right? Is you're going to be, that kind of introspective artist kind of, but then the wing 3, the performer, the charmer, right? Yeah. So it's that mixture of. I
don't want to be near that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. But then it's, the more Enneagram 4 wing 3 artist performers I meet, they're confusing to themselves, but then they're confusing to some people, because it's like, dude, I saw you on stage, and it's like you wanted everybody to be with you, but then we hung out afterwards at dinner and whatever, and like you didn't speak. Right. Like, so, like, are you this guy or are you that guy? Yeah. And I'm sure as you're living that, there's got to be a balance of, okay, I can do that, and I like that attention, but then I'm this guy, but I'm that guy, and then the family dynamics, all of it.
Yeah, it's like a hamster wheel. I don't want to find out what happens when I stop. And yeah, I think deep down into the layers of my heart, like with this belief that if you take off this mask, you will be right back where you were when you started, with one friend maybe, and feeling misunderstood and lonely. And so I was like, well, I'm going to put super glue on that mask. I'm never taking it off. And so it wasn't until I didn't have any role models. I didn't have any men to look up to. And, this next part is always really vulnerable to share, but it's the truth, is that the first time I ever saw a Christian man that I wanted to be like, it was Joel Houston from Hillsong United. We went and saw them when I was in college, and I saw him on stage, and I saw his passion and his articulation and the way he commanded the room, and I thought, I believe that guy. And I want to be somebody that people believe like that, and that really set me on a path to become like Joel Houston, and so instead of becoming like Jesus, I was like, if I can be like Joel Houston, I'll become like Jesus. And if I didn't have anybody to say, hey, Joel has a room full of 10,000 people and you have a room full of 200. So maybe you cut the song down a little bit. Maybe you don't do the extra 3 bridges of Mighty to Save with the drum solo, because he was doing that in a stadium and you're not.
Right.
And I was like, I didn't know any better, and I think that my generation of worship leaders grew up without mentors, and we are the ones that the church leaned heavily on for the modern worship revolution.
Or like you're saying, their mentors were distant and up there and doing that.
They were digital.
Yeah, and they were digital.
Yeah, and it was a one-way thing.
Yeah.
Where I hear Matt Redman talk before a song, and I go, I want to learn how to do that. And so I would try to figure out how to talk before songs, and eventually I did. I got good at it. And
What was funny to me, I remember during college and some of the different, because I did, in my 20s, did a lot of worship leading as far as playing drums in bands. And what's funny to me is when you would hear a worship leader like talk before a song, and then all of a sudden you'd be like, I think you just spoke with an accent. which I think you were doing so much of a Matt Redman or so much of a Joel Houston that you're from Iowa and you just said that with an accent. But I think some of that is like they hear the album, they watch it, they want to be, and all of a sudden before you know it, it's like, well, did I? Yeah, I think I did just talk in an Australian accent, and I'm from Iowa.
Yeah, that's how I heard it, and I'm just trying to be like my rabbi. I'm trying to walk in his footsteps, and if that means I'd say God instead of God, then that's
so
fine.
Be it.
Yeah. What are accents really? God doesn't care. It got all the way to his.
He heard
ears.
his name. It's fine.
Yeah. And even the mannerisms, I would watch and I'd go, okay, I need to make sure. But yeah, the truth was I didn't have anybody to, and so many of the guys my age were just like, we had their pastors. We go, okay, we have to get modern right now. Here are a team of 8 volunteers, none of whom you would have a relationship with otherwise. Most of them don't want to go modern and are going to give you a hard time. Here's Planning Center. Good luck. I'll see you on Sunday.
Yeah.
And we go, oh man, how do I get this 70-year-old woman to learn how to play, 2 notes instead of 7 at the same time? And how do I get this drummer to realize that he's not all that because he can't actually play with the click track? And we got all these 22-year-old boys going, wrestling with 50-year-old men and about like, how do I say this nicely? And man, that was really, really, really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so on top of that, I had this deep insecurity. And so like the rhythms of a 4 of the performing and crashing would be hard enough. They're hard enough when you're healthy.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like I'm at today. But when you're not healthy, oh my goodness, it is just wild. The euphoric highs and then the depths of the crashes. And so.
And would you say, Cameron, in pulling back to seeing what was some of the stuff that was going on with your family, and I would say, knowing church culture that I grew up in those decades, the idea of vulnerability, of being open with, I'm not healthy, or even being able to admit,
right.
You know what, I don't think I'm doing this very well.
Right.
Like I'm doing the stage well, but there's some stuff going on inside of me that is really unhealthy. That wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't say it's encouraged celebrated.
No way, because when I finally felt God's calling on my life to be a worship leader when I graduated college, I realized like I need to start in a new place. I can't be a leader at the church that I grew up in because I'm always going to be, everybody's grandson and nephew. And when I left, like, people were really, really upset with me. And my parents were really upset with me because they thought I was Neo. They thought I was the chosen one that was going to lead this church into the next century. I was going to carry on the mantle of my great grandfather. And so even that, like, even within my own family, I felt this pressure to perform and to perform within their constraints and the ways they wanted me to. And so as soon as I got to, I did finally become a full-time worship pastor at a church in Hamilton County. And as soon as I got there, I just remember week one, this guy comes up to me, and you can tell he's got an agenda. He's not coming to get to know who I am. He says, "Hi, yeah, I'm Mike or whatever." And he says, "How do you feel about dramas on Sunday?" And I was like, "This is completely loaded."
Yeah.
And I know it. And I said, and I had a politician in me. I said, "Dramas, when done well, can be effective. How's that?" And he kind of he knew what I was saying, and he got mad and just walked away. Didn't even finish the conversation. And I was like, "Hey, welcome to the big leagues, bro. Like, this is what you got." And then you have people talking in your ear about, we need more hymns and we need more of that, and turn this off and turn this up. And I was not ready for that. I was just a boy that loved Jesus and loved worshiping. And I really didn't know much about leadership at all. And I really felt thrown to the wolves. And so over the course of the next 6 years, actually, so 1 year in, you talked about, is it okay to not be okay? I confessed a pornography addiction that had started really when I was pretty young. My first exposure to pornography was probably, I want to say 4th or 5th grade.
Yeah.
And I had wrestled with it. I had done all the things I had gotten. I made an accountability group. I read Stephen R. Rubin's book, Every Man's Battle.
Yeah.
Talked to multiple pastors, and I could not beat this thing. And I just had kind of just tucked it away and thought, well, as long as it's not affecting anybody else, I think I can just keep that beast locked in this box and pretend it doesn't exist. Well, 1 year in, I felt like Jesus said, "I'm worthy of this confession. I'm worthy of all of your heart, and so you need to confess." Well, that didn't go well. I confessed to my wife, and she was devastated. Confessed to my pastors, and they were really angry with me. And ultimately, the message was, don't let anyone know about this, because people will want to fire you. And if it happens again, you're probably going to lose your job. And so I had already developed a pretty sophisticated AI for managing this secret.
Yeah.
And what that did was really put 100 times the computing power into that AI to go, all right, guys, we found a flaw in the system, and we can never let that happen again. So I made it about 3 months. I went to counseling, made it about 3 months, and then acted out. And I was like, one of the things they said, the lead pastor said was, one of the elders said we should smash its phone. And, that statement is, the statement alone and the fact that he would share it with me is just so ignorant to go, because my phone is the only place in the world.
Right, that you could do this.
Yeah.
And that's probably the issue, right? If we could just smash the phone and fix the problem.
Yeah, and so it's one of the things where there's truth hidden in sarcasm, is that they really believe that their view of this issue was so limited.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, I don't know what I should have expected. I think they all had really limited capacity. But so that also taught me a lot about that lead pastor, to go, I can't really be myself with him. I don't really trust him. He's not really for me. But dang it, I just got my Spidey suit. I just found my calling. I just found my people. I could never leave this job and go back to being an insurance agent assistant or whatever I was doing. And so all of that was man, I got sharp. I got super sharp at hiding what I was doing and playing the part. And again, it wasn't a conscious decision. It's survival.
Yeah.
Emotional, psychological survival. And man, I prayed so hard for God to grow my heart for my people of that church. And the prayer I specifically prayed was, would you entangle the roots of my heart with the roots of their hearts? That our hearts would be rooted together. And God answered that prayer, and we had a season of successful ministry. But man, things got weird real quick once we went multi-site. And I don't think we were ready to do that. And I think that I could totally, at the time I was all about it because I defended the logo church with everything I had because I was so attached to it. My identity was so wrapped up in it. So anybody that said, hey, we're not ready to do this, like, why are you trying to hold back the kingdom of God?
Right,
you know?
right.
And, but man, we weren't ready for that. We didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't have the inner staff trust even, you know? And so the next 4 years were slowly just more and more miserable. We hired another worship leader who was just like me in so many ways. And, that can either go really well or really poorly. And, it went really poorly. But there were so many issues. So my issue was passion. And I think the guys that were on the leadership there, their issue was passivity. And they called it grace. But actually, we had a lot of problems that grew in the dark. And so, meanwhile, at home, I had my wife and I struggled with infertility for 3 years. We had our own marriage issues that was happening. My personality tends to draw out either the very best in people or the very worst in people. And so we were clashing a lot. I was clashing at work. I didn't feel like there was any way out. And secretly, my addiction was growing, my porn addiction. And so that was, I think, eroding my moral compass. And then in 2016, I was really miserable. And I felt like just a shell of myself, and I wanted some relief. I wanted some friendship, companionship, and so I turned to a person on staff who was, who was on staff and began an extramarital affair. And that relationship lasted for 3 months, and then it came out in February of 2017. And that was really the final blow of that sad phase of my life. And you're not going to believe it, but the pastor who didn't handle the pornography well wasn't really equipped to handle this well either. Ultimately, I think 1 Corinthians 5, expel the immoral brother, was kind of cited as kind of, hey, let's pull back everybody. Cameron, we're going to say all the right things. We wish you the best, but you're on your own. And Carissa would kind of stay shamed. That's a thing that happens when women stay with the men that betray them, that's like, well, we can't trust you anymore because you don't see it clearly or whatever. And so we lost our support system overnight. My family was never a support system for me, and God bless Carissa's parents and her family because they had this radical grace that made me believe, you know, if I had no other way to believe in Christianity, the way they treated me would make me believe in Jesus.
Wow.
There was at one point I had a neck injury. It was like 3 weeks after everything happened or something like that. And her mom's a masseuse, so she started working on my neck for me. And I'll tell you, man, that's a transformative grace. And I laid there and I cried. And I said, Polly, how can you be serving this boy that hurt your daughter so badly? And she thought about it and she said, well, I'm either a Christian or I'm not. And I said, I will never forget that. And there was another lady, Kathy Elzinga. I want her name to be memorialized on this podcast because she was the one that I called and I said, I have to tell Carissa something terrible. I need somebody to be there. Can you be there? She said, I'm on my way. And we trusted her. And after I shared everything, I said, Kathy is somebody who loved your daughters who were teenagers. And I loved having a place of honor in their life. I'm so sorry for what I've done. And she looked up and she said, they will see Christ outshine you.
Wow.
That's the kind of faith that changes people.
Yeah.
And so I felt the hardest part then of the next 5 years was trying to get over the grief of how our close friends and how our pastors in that church had treated us. I'm still not over it. Mm-hmm. I'm still really wrestling with bitterness and resentment. But I had to change, and had this weird mix of misery and relief. So it felt like if you were on the run from the law for 5 years and you needed medical attention, but you couldn't have it because then that'd put you on the grid.
Right.
They finally pin you down in the woods somewhere, and they put you on a stretcher, and you're like, man, I'm just glad I'm going to the hospital. So I was devastated.
First, let me say, Cameron, thank you for allowing us access to the story. because you are not alone for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're not alone in men or women that have had an absolute genuine calling from God, an absolute genuine passion for Christ, have given everything in that process. And then when they said, hey, I really need the grace and the love of God because I'm broken like we all are.
Yeah.
Right. It was like leper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think you're right, is that the sad part is it feels like, we're not going to go down this road to figure out if the structural of institutional church in America is core of the problem.
Right.
I think it kind of is.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's not this podcast. But we're just not equipped, or we don't want to be. I don't know what it is that when we have, like, we basically, shoot our wounded.
Yeah.
And I think that I hate that you've gone through that. There's sometimes I have my own story of failures and mistakes, and receiving a letter where I was told I was disposed of for ministry. And when we have those moments, I think they're really difficult. And there's times that I've thought, like, why did I have to go through that? Well, some of the answer, the why I had to do that, is because I made stupid decisions, right? Like,
yeah.
right? Like,
yeah.
Some of it's the consequences of what we did. But there's times that I wonder is there are probably thousands of guys and girls right now that are somewhere in that place that you are in.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you look at the stats on pornography, like, it's not like this is a problem for like 1 or 2% of people.
It's like 1 out of every 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the 2 that says it's not, they're probably lying.
Yeah.
So this is happening under the surface and destroying people, but yet, I guess in some way there's got to be some people that have hit rock bottom and have clawed their way back to the surface and still are holding on to a shred of faith and connection to Christ, and holding on to a shred of connection of his invitation back into ministry, holding on to a shred of faith of being still in community, to say, hey, there's a path forward here. This isn't it.
Yeah.
And so thank you for opening your story to us, because I think it's going to be healing and instructive.
I hope so.
To people. Yeah. And I know that's your heart.
Yeah, for sure. I think the sad thing is that some of God's greatest stories get buried under shame.
Yep.
Because people are too afraid to say what God rescued them from. And
That's good, Cameron.
I had this mentality where I go, hang on. And Carissa, she's an amazing girl. And she and I mean, this has been absolute hell. So anybody that's watching goes, oh, I want that, plan on it being a 5-year thing.
Yeah.
Okay, because one of the things that bothered the people at the church was, like, you need to go to the 6-month program and get healed and go away for 6 months. And everybody else I talked to said that's not how addiction works. Addiction isn't something that gets healed.
Right.
It's something, it's a symptom, and there's, you got to go back to the foundation and all that. And so anytime then people go, man, you talk about this freedom, I'm going to give it to you straight, man. It's as good as it looks, and it's way harder than it looks. But I do want people to have that hope. And we decided, let's flip the script here, because the thing that Satan meant to bury us in shame, like, if we flip that and just show everybody, then that unlocks a whole new level of power and redemption. And the truth is, for all of my creativity, I did way too much on staff at that church. I did video, music. I played every instrument on stage. I did photography, graphic design, website, communication, programming. And, they had to replace me with 2 people when I left. And nobody saw that as a problem while I was there. Again, hindsight is 20/20. But I've had to admit to myself, all that time I really wanted people to just shut up and do what I said. I started and I think a lot of pastors start this way. I was a pure-hearted boy who loved Jesus and wanted people to love him too.
Yeah.
And eventually I got to the point I was like, you stupid sheep, get here on time. quit leaving early to go to the Colts game. You know, I had this set of things that I thought people needed to do, and if they would just do it, we could all move forward to the kingdom. And I was definitely humbled that I did. People said they loved me as a worship leader, but they didn't sing. And I thought, no, I think what you love is you love watching me worship. And they said it did something for them, but for all my creative might, I could not change people. And I could not get people to do what I told them to do. And then all this thing happened to hit rock bottom. I start this recovery, and a few years later, I've got people, even from that church, calling me saying, "Hey man, can you help me? Like, nobody knows."
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I think I can. And so we decided to go public with our story like 2.5 years after everything came out. I mean, it had already been public. It came out on a Thursday, and that Sunday they announced it at both campuses. And we said, "Can you wait a week?" And they said no. And that introduced, a whole other set of questions and issues. But so immediately everybody knew the worst thing I'd ever done in my life. And it feels a lot like when Iron Man says, "I am Iron Man." Everybody's like, "What? You didn't just say that?" Like, that was so shocking and an incredible end to, I'm a huge MCU fan, so don't get me started. But for me to stand up and say, I'm an adulterer, I'm a recovering sex addict. I went to speak at a Celebrate Recovery, and it got back to me that there was a guy there who had murdered a couple people and had been, in recovery for a while or whatever. And he said, "Boy, Cameron," I'm not going to say what he said. That guy's got, we'll say, stones. Yeah. And like, that guy has courage. And like, a murderer is telling me that he said I couldn't do what he just did. And that's really says a lot to the issue that people view sex addiction as like below murder. Like, it's almost easier to confess murder than like the people that are like more afraid of public speaking than dying or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, we came out with it, and we posted it to my wife's blog and stuff, and we've helped a lot of people. And we did that for a year, and then things with marriage are still messy. And so we kind of got to the point where we're going to back off, and this thing served us. We don't serve it. And so the last couple of years, we've kind of gone a lot more quiet, and we're finally at a point, and that's why I came on the podcast. And I think I'm ready to step into my calling. I've really wrestled with God on that. I don't want to be the guy that people think of when they think of adultery or sex addiction, but in sharing my story, God's done so much more with my weakness than he ever did with my creative might.
That sounds like something I read in the Bible one time, Cameron.
Yeah, his power is made stronger than my weakness. And that's absolutely been true. And so I even told, got my friend Miguel with me today. We walked in, I said, "This feels so weird. I'm not carrying any cameras or guitars or anything." And that's not a thing for me. Ever since I was 16, I was lugging an amp and a guitar or tripods or something. And God said, I think God still wants to use all that, but just me being transparent is changing people's lives, and me just saying I failed and God loves me anyway. And oh, by the way, there is recovery is possible. And that's the part that I also want to make sure people hear, is that addiction, any type of addiction, you can overcome it. It's way harder than you think. It's just like losing weight. You don't go to a camp or something for 6 months and then you got to learn a whole new way of living. Yeah. And that's why people don't do it. It's because it's really, 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 really hard.
Yeah. I remember Davey Blackburn, talking about the trauma he went through, and one of the phrases he used it stuck with me is, it's so often in the healing process of whatever it's from, we always want it to be more poof than process. Yeah. Let's come down the altar right now. Let's lay hands on you, what I mean? And poof, you know what I mean?
People did that to us when we were struggling with infertility. Like, you know what? Let's just pray for it right now. It's like, do you have any idea that you're the 60th person? Like, don't act like that's We go, okay. And then at that point, we're just going along with it to serve them. Yeah. Because we don't want to disappoint them.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, I'm not going to say that there aren't some times that God does miraculous poof healings. Right.
It's just there's so many funny little nuances of Christianity. Yes. He might this time. I don't know.
Well, and I think the thing is, it's not as attractive to say, hey, listen, let's start praying right now that God gives you the perseverance to walk this out for the next 6 years. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, do you have a pill I could take or something? It's like, no. And I think you go back to scriptures, and we understand, when God's like, hey, listen, I am the good shepherd, right? And my rod and my staff, they'll comfort you, and I will walk with you through the valley of the shadow of death. Like, what he didn't say is like, I've got a magic carpet ride.
I will heal addiction.
I'll take you right over the valley of the shadow of death. It's like, no, when you're in it, here's what we're going to walk through it.
Yeah.
Like the only way past it is through it, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the most important parts, because I prayed for so many years, like, God, could you just take my sexuality away? Could you take this addiction away? Like, I'm fine to never have sex again. I'm fine to never, like, I just don't want to be like this anymore.
Right.
And one of the things that I remember hearing, and I went to a 2-week crisis recovery center in North Carolina, and called His High Places. And one of the teachings they had me watch while I was there was, this guy said, the gospel isn't that God helps you avoid your circumstances. The gospel is that Jesus joins you in your consequences.
Yeah.
Not that you avoid your consequences, but Jesus joins you in your consequences. And I put it on pause, and I put my head back, and I just cried for like 10 minutes. And that made so much more sense to me, because I was like, why haven't you helped me out of this? Why haven't you? He's like, no, man, this hurts me too. And it's just like Sam and Frodo, like, going to, in Lord of the Rings, I love that story. And Sam's like, I'm just going to be there no matter what happens. And I wish I could change it, but I can't. And that was a singular thought that changed my life, because I never understood why God allowed things to happen the way he did. Why don't you rescue me from this? And one of the things that the Lord said in the days to come was, if I had just moved that mountain, you would never know what it would be like to stand on top of it. And I do know that now, Daron. I know what it's like to stand on top of this mountain and know I did the hard work.
Yeah.
I worked my ass off.
Yeah.
And nobody can take that from me.
Yeah.
Anybody that's, commenting on Facebook or from that church that wants to say I'm this or that, like, I know the truth.
Yeah.
And that's a security that I didn't have before.
Yeah.
I was just blown around in the wind by whatever people had to say about me. And now and Carissa knows it too, and there's a few people in my life that know it. Just last week, a week or two ago, Carissa's dad told me, he said, you are twice the man I am for going through what you went through and handling it the way you have. And he's an amazing guy. And that meant so much to me to go that, like, oh, I'm not less than, I'm not like, but like this courage that this persistence, like that actually has value. Yeah. And nobody can take that away from me now.
Yeah. I love it. There's so many biblical stories that are popping in my brain that just apply so powerfully. And I think that's, if we can get back, I'm not going to say the church, because we can't control the church. If we can get back, as individuals,
as dreamers, we want to say that.
We do,
right?
Right.
Like, we want the church to do this,
right?
Like, I mean, and that's from a place of optimism,
yeah,
a place of expectancy, and a place of faith. So easy to go, man, it's the church.
Yeah,
just got this.
But I think where it has to go is, like, we are the church.
Yes.
And if we gather 2 or 3, that is the church. And so for me, for you that's watching or listening, like, don't sit around and wait for the church or pray for the church as something outside of yourself. Like, listen to this story, apply this story, and go, how do I today, in the next relationship that I come into, how do I live out these type of biblical truths with the people that are right in front of me? And then all of a sudden, guess what? If we all just did that individually, we would see the church.
Oh, it'd be amazing.
Be the church.
Yeah.
And Cameron, that's something you're trying to do. And I want to talk about this real quick before we're done. You've taken, but the cool part is you took all the good stuff that God gave you and you just kept giving it back to him. You're doing amazing work with the video and all the creative stuff you're doing. But what we could talk about videos because you're great with that and everything else you're doing on that side of things. But what I want to talk about is you're just taking a step forward even this week.
Yeah.
And saying, okay, God, I'll trust you with this part of the story a little bit further. Talk about what you want to do with Pastor in the Wild.
Shoot. It's gonna make me emotional. I've just been wrestling with God for so long, and I don't want to get back out there. I don't want to get kicked around again. I don't want to be judged again. Like, if that's what's gonna happen, like, why can't I just stay home and be happy? And God's just been slowly dumbing it down for me. Like, dude, that's like a hammer in a shed, like rusting away. Like, you were made to influence people. You were made to share your story. You were made to be expressive. You were made to be sensitive. You were made to be funny, to be charismatic, and to tell your story. And I'm so scared of hurting people again. And I'm so scared of getting caught up in all of that. And I've fought God really, really, really hard. And I've told him, God, if you want me, you got to come get me. I am never going to beg somebody to care what I have to say ever again. And I was on a retreat actually with earlier this summer with Carissa, and I kind of said that. And within the next few weeks, I got like 3 invitations to come and speak and share my story. And I was like, oh no,
He came and got me.
Yeah.
Why did I pray that?
And I know he loves me, and I know that he, I read Matthew 10 when Jesus called the disciples, and one of my favorite verses is about not a sparrow falls from the sky apart from the will of the Father, and you're worth more than many sparrows. But I never realized that he was saying that in the context of this is going to be hard, and like you're going to be scared as you go back into ministry, and so I am scared. I'm really scared, and I'm scared that somehow I'll just jump back into my addiction tomorrow because like spiritual attack or something like that. But I realized a few things. One is that I have to be obedient, and I have to be obedient to my Father. And teaching Scarlett, I do everything I do for you because I love you, and the only way you can really say thank you is to trust and obey. And I tell her, trust and obey, and you'll have a good day. And I feel like I'm at the point where I'm not being obedient if I don't try to do this thing, if I don't. And I'm still, it's just like, I can't emphasize enough how much I'm not doing this for attention.
Yeah.
I don't want attention at all. And there was a time when I did because I felt good, but I do believe in what God has done in me. I do believe it can be replicated.
Yeah.
And to go back to Spider-Man, when the bad things happen and you could have stopped them and they happen because of you, I start to feel that responsibility of like, I could at least make a PDF that tells what I did. I could at least make a quick video. I could at least speak somewhere and share that story. So ultimately, I decided to call it Pastor in the Wild because I don't want to be a pastor of a church. I never want to be on staff at a church again. Anybody listening, thank your pastors. It's a way harder job than you think. But I do still have a shepherd's heart and a father's heart, and I want to help people. And so I think there are seasons of life that pastors aren't really sure what to do with. And some to their fault and some to no fault of their own. They don't have the time to learn about trauma and recovery and stuff. And so what I want to do is come alongside the church and say, how can we all become pastors in the wild? Because that's really what we're all called to be. It shouldn't be hey, I know one guy who knows what to do about pornography addiction.
Right.
I know one guy who does empathy really well. And so Carissa's ministry has been kind of geared towards women unofficially, and mine's going to be kind of unofficially geared towards men. The tagline is traversing recovery and masculinity. And for me to be talking about masculinity is really interesting because I'm not your typical masculine guy, but I've learned what it means to be masculine, and I want to help other men navigate that too. And I want to give men hope that if you're listening to this right now and you have some addiction that you're struggling with or some mental illness, you know what I mean when I say you've been limping for your whole life, and you've kind of just accepted that. And I believe God, you were made to run, and the church doesn't know how to get you to the point where you're running again. And I can't walk you all the way through that, but I can tell you how God did it for me. And I do have a lot of teaching content and videos that I want to make in creative ways that hopefully are engaging. I believe that God wants to do a powerful thing through my story, to no credit of my own, and that hundreds, thousands of people will run one day and find that purpose, and that one day they'll even forget. They won't even remember my name. They'll just have their own story about what God did. And so if I this week I had this podcast coming up. I was like, okay, I made a website. It's got a landing page for where you can put in your email address, pastorinthewild.com. And if you're somebody listening and you want to do that, just know that I don't know. I'd love to be on this journey with you, and I'd love to encourage people, love to give them some practical, helpful things as they navigate what's maybe the hardest parts of their lives.
Cameron, I love it. PastorintheWild.com. Go check it out if that's a resource you need. And Cameron, here's what I love. The idea to bring your story full circle, right? The whole process before was a process of obedience, right? But you just stepped into it with an immaturity, right?
Yeah,
it was
sure.
about gifts. was about charisma. It was
I didn't
about
have the infrastructure to
Right.
handle the success that
Yeah.
I was about to have.
and it was kind of about you.
Yeah.
And now the beauty of it is, you're what hasn't changed is you're still saying, I'm going to trust and obey.
Yeah.
But to step into it now and be like, for as much as it can be right now, this isn't about me. This is really about Christ shining through me, you know? And there's
Yeah.
just and I love that it doesn't take away the fear,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I think so often we're like, well, I was going to do this, but I'm really afraid. It's like, no, fear's always your enemy. But when you can choose courage and know that it's backed up by just a hard fought humility, I mean, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard fought humility, and ultimately I won't be crushed if it doesn't work. And if it doesn't, I'm like, God, this was your thing, man.
Yeah, it's not about you anyway.
Yeah, it's not. This is not a reflection on me. If people don't care what I have to say, or they don't like the font that I chose, or whatever, I'm going to do the best I can. And God, you can do whatever you want with it. I do believe that's the biblical standard, is that we give Him our meager offering, the best that we can, and He does something miraculous with it. So I don't think He can do something with us. We give Him nothing. But I am content with my offering of what I've given Him, and I feel I love this is so funny. In the song "The Little Drummer Boy," when he says, "I play my best for you,"
Yeah.
that is my heart. Is that when I play music, like I think of that line. I'm just going to play my best, and I have no gift to bring that are fit for a king, but I'll play my best. So I'm gonna do my best with writing. I'm gonna try to have writing in an engaging way. I'm gonna do my best with video editing. I'm gonna do my best with the music that I want to make and put out. And then I'm gonna be satisfied in that work and confident that I have given Him my very best, and He can do with it whatever He wants.
Yeah. Cameron, I love it. I love the story. I love where you're going. I can't wait to see where it goes and to count you a friend as you walk through it, brother.
Thank you so much. And I got to say, you even caring, even if we didn't have microphones in front of us, just being willing to believe me, to believe, to hear me out. It's sad, but that's still pretty rare. And you using a platform like this to let people share their weakness is giving God an avenue to show His strength and His power. So thank you so much for
I appreciate
having
it.
me on.
We can't awaken people to become what God's created them to be without helping them realize and get their minds around and their hearts around, their souls around. Like, yes, God has given you great gifts, but that process of understanding His transformational power of the weakness, right? It's not pretty, it's not easy, and it's not a magic trick.
Right.
And so if we can't be honest about that and learn to link arms together and fight through that battle, we're just delaying the process of the next young Cameron Sprinkle, the next young Daron Earlewine going, hey, I've got gifts and abilities. I want to make a difference in the world, but not knowing how do I actually see the transformational process happen alongside the path, right?
Yeah.
So I love it. Cameron Sprinkle, right here on the Daron Earlewine podcast. Go to pastorinthewild.com to get connected.
There's a real website there, and
I
everything.
love it. I love it. And we're back. Woo. I told you. I told you. So much hope, so much healing, so much grace, but pain. It's real. And Cameron's still walking through it. He's still figuring it out. But he's not paralyzed in it. He's not stuck in it. He's moving forward in it. I love that quote that he shared there towards the end, right? When you heard that quote, that Jesus doesn't help you avoid circumstances or consequences, right? He joins you in them. So good. I've used the quote here before. I can't remember the author at the top of my head right now. When he said that we're not punished for our sins, we're punished by them. And I hope that you're able to see that in this process of becoming who you were born to be. You're probably not going to be the hero you wish and want to be all the times. There's going to be some moments in your journey of becoming the person that God's created you to be where you're actually probably going to have a season or two where you're the villain. You didn't set out to be, but you find yourself in a place where you have hurt those around you. And it could be a situation like Cameron talked about, where you're just at a place where your competencies, your charisma, it's elevated you and it's pushed you out further than your character can sustain you. Or it could be that it's not necessarily connected to chemistry or competencies. It's just you're at a place of immaturity where you just haven't grown to the place to learn some stuff, and you're kind of the villain in the story, and you're hurting people, and you're hurting yourself. And the tough part about those moments when you realize that you're not the hero, you're the villain, is to realize, A, that's not your core identity. That's very, very key to understand. And to understand, as I say every single week, that in that moment, in those moments, in those seasons, is God's for you. He's not against you in it, and he's still near you, not far away. And he is not playing the role of punisher in your life, but he's also not waving a magic wand to remove all of the consequences of the decisions that you've made. He's not your punisher. He's also not your genie. He's a good shepherd. He's a friend that sticks closer than a brother. He's near you. He's walking through this with you, and he joins you in your consequences. And so I want to leave you guys with this. Is if you're in a place of failure and pain right now, I want you to know that Jesus is joining you in the pain and the confusion of your consequences. And he loves you, and he's near you, and he's already there. You just need to reach out and receive his presence there. Some of you need to hear that. And guess what? He's going to be able to outshine your failures in this moment. If, on the other hand, you're walking with someone that is currently experiencing the pain of their consequences, they've made decisions that have brought negative consequences into their life, and you have the honor of walking with them, right? Being Christ-like and walking with them through consequences, and that is a big Christ-like thing, right? So I want to love like Jesus. That doesn't necessarily mean pointing a finger, pointing out the failure, and then voting people off the island, right? We don't have a lot of that with Jesus, or any actually, where he just canceled people. We do have a lot of opportunities to see where Jesus shows compassion. The word compassion, meaning meaning with, passion, meaning suffering, where Jesus, the God of all comfort and compassion, moved into the sufferings of the consequences of people's actions and gave them grace, which was forgiveness, but it's also presence. And maybe that's the honor that you have right now with someone who all of a sudden they've realized that they've become the villain in their own story. And what they need right now is not someone to tell them how bad they are. They feel that. They don't need somebody to step into their life and try to punish them, to shame them. It doesn't help. What they need is someone to compassionately step into the suffering of their consequences and walk with them. And if that's an opportunity that God is giving you to do, take it seriously. Receive it humbly. And I pray that you walk through it with courage and faith and grace, because they need you. Because like I said there at the end of the interview, is that we can sit back if we're a part of a local church. Maybe we've been a part of the church a lot. And I say these things, and we talk about the church, changing and being this. And I was hurt by the church. No, you were hurt by people. And you're a person and I'm a person. And so we can't do a lot to fix whatever we see wrong with the church. And the longer that we rail on and throw stones at the church, the worse it's going to get, because that doesn't help anybody. But what I can do and what you can do, because together where 2 or 3 of us are gathered, Jesus says, I'm there with you and there is my church, is what I can do. And what you can do is I can say, I'm going to be the change I want to see, right? I'm going to start stepping into people who are feeling the pain of the consequences of their actions. And I'm going to do my best to show up the way Jesus shows up in my life when I'm the villain. And if we can begin to do that, there'll be more stories like Cameron's, where his mother-in-law and that woman that stepped into his life and said, listen, I'm here because I'm either a Christian or I'm not. And the reality is that Christ is going to outshine you. That's good news, friend. And that's where we need to go. Hey, listen, thanks for listening in. Go check out Pastor in the Wild if you need that resource. If you need a short read, maybe to remind you that God's in the midst of these consequences you may be in, I want to send you a free book. If you just go to DaronEarlewine.com, at the bottom of the page is a tab that says ebook. It's the God is Near ebook. Click on that, and we'll send you a free copy of God is Near. It's a short ebook that I wrote during the quarantine last year. Or you can just go to DaronEarlewine.com/God-is-near. Either way gets you the free resource. I'd love to send it to you just to give you something to read, to encourage you to know that God is near you in this struggle, and maybe give you some, even if you're walking with someone, some insight and some wisdom to walk better and in a more Christ-like way with someone who may be feeling the pain of the consequences of their actions, and you can be a part of their redemption journey. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening again to the Daron Earlewine podcast. It means the world to me. I love sharing these moments with you. Would love to hear from you. Reach out to me. You can email me, Daron@blackbirdmission.com. You can reach out through any social media platform. You can text me, 317-550-5070, and would love to stay in dialogue with you. Until we meet again next week, remember this: God's for you, not against you. He's near you, not far from you, and He's created you on purpose and for a purpose. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Daron Earlewine podcast.